Am I the a-hole for reporting my Tinder date to the FBI? So I, 27F, recently went on a Tinder date with this guy, 32M, who works at a nuclear power plant. It seemed interesting over text, but the actual date turned into a complete nightmare. He shows up 45 minutes late, no apology, and just starts bragging about his job as shift leader in the control room. His attitude was really off-putting. He talks about having power over midgets and vermin, and by that, he means people in general, which was really disturbing. He ranted about how much he hates everyone he sees and how he wants to cause chaos and destruction. I tried to steer the conversation to something else, but he kept fixating on his job. Then, things got really worse. He starts bragging about knowing how to trigger a reactor core meltdown, laughing about it like it's some kind of joke. I could not tell if he was serious, but it totally freaked me out. It seemed like he was getting a kick out of the idea of using his position to cause a catastrophe. I ended the date early and then went home and couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Was he trying to impress me in a sick way, or could he really be that dangerous? After a lot of thought, I decided to report him to the FBI. I figured it's better to be safe than sorry, right? But now I'm second-guessing myself. Some friends think I did the right thing, but others say I should have just ignored it since he was probably joking. I can't shake the feeling I might have overreacted and potentially ruined someone's career over a bad joke. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for reporting my Tinder date to the FBI for bragging about being able to cause a meltdown? User 1 commented, "There are multiple layers of safety mechanisms at nuclear power plants. It's not as simple as some disgruntled employee triggering a catastrophic failure that causes the core to collapse. If that were the case, anyone having a terrible day or being given a nice payout could kill people and or contaminate large areas by pressing a single button." OP replied and said, he had a really complicated plan to shut down the coolant, which included drugging his coworkers and barricading himself in the control room. He also said he had some convoluted loophole to get past automated safety features. Maybe he was completely full of BS and making it up, but it sounded real to me. Update. So, a lot's happened in the past 24 hours. The dude absolutely blows up my phone after the date, sending literally over 100 text and voicemails. He gets increasingly angry that I won't respond. At first, he goes on about how I'm the perfect girl. I'm the girl of his dreams. He wants me to be a sidekick as he conquers the world. I'm the Harley Quinn to his Joker, yada yada yada. Then he gets increasingly angry and deranged as I won't respond, and leaves these crazed voicemails where he's going on and on about I don't know what. He starts going on these incel rants like r/nice guys or whatever, going on and on about how women have never given him a chance and how he's going to teach them all a big lesson. So I finally give in and respond. I'm pissed off and want to knock him down a notch. I tell him I contacted the FBI and send him the Reddit post. He says he doesn't care because there's no way they can get him. I tell him he's full of it because according to many experts who commented here, commercial reactors have too many automatic safeguards to prevent a lone SRO from doing anything dangerous. So he sends me this picture of a thumb drive. He says the thumb drive has some code written in C that will disable all the secondary and tertiary safeguards and the emergency scram/shutdown. He says he's a self-taught cybersecurity genius and he knows how to disable all these systems. He told me this plan to drug his coworkers and lock himself in the control room, and explosives rigged up to stop police from coming in. He told me this is all to punish women who never gave him a chance and to start the incel rebellion. Then he gave me a choice to be his queen or to perish like all the other vermin. So I had enough at this point. Sent these messages to the FBI and also sent everything to the NRC and the Homeland Security tip line as people suggested. Still haven't heard anything. Y'all, this dude is plotting like a Despicable Me villain. I had to stop recording because when he said incel rebellion, I lost it. And you have the chance to be my queen or perish like all the other vermin. Okay, next story. Story number 2. I, 36M, set up 2 of my friends, 36F and 36M. I found out today he has been catfishing me as his partner on her phone to check up on our friendship. We stopped being friends briefly when she got married way too young to her boss. He ended up being incredibly abusive, controlling her life at every level, and over the 3 years they were together, he basically isolated her from all friends and family. We reconciled when she divorced him. Around this time, I attended university and met my now wife early on. We were assigned to the same floor in halls. We've been together for 17 years now, and she's become really close to Emily over the years. Also at my university, I met a guy named George on my course. We were part of the same friendship group, but didn't stay in touch until we coincidentally ended up working together a good 10 years after graduation. I ended up introducing him to Emily, and they started a relationship. A year or so later, they moved in together. Emily was happy, he was happy. On the face of things, he's seemingly been fine with me and Emily's friendship and never said anything. Then, over the past few weeks, I started getting texts from her, sometimes late at night, that were just off. I was suspicious when she used a common British shortening of my full name rather than the traditional German version our respective fathers and she would always use. And when some overtly flirting happened and some outright sexting occurred, I immediately shut it down, 100% sure it wasn't her. I basically called him out and asked if this was in fact George using her phone and bluntly asked why he was trying to sext with me as his girlfriend. He never responded, but after explaining the situation to my wife, she went over to Emily's with my phone to see what was going on. I wasn't there for this, but she showed Emily our entire text history and what he had done. George came home and they confronted him. At first, he outright denied it and had the balls to accuse Emily of sexting me and trying to hide said cheating from my wife by saying he did it. Emily just left with my wife to come stay with us after this because there wasn't any reasoning with him. The morning after, he called and begged her to come home. He was crying and threw himself at her feet, claiming he did it out of jealousy. He highlighted that she was in the habit of deleting our conversations, which drove him mad. An apparent choice she makes for all of her texts with everyone, not just me, by the way. And he was always jealous of our relationship. He found it hard to see me with her, and after he saw her saying stuff like how she loved me again, we're like siblings, and him not being able to read our texts drove him to basically go catfishing to establish our relationship. The sexting was an attempt to bluntly see if it was something we, or more specifically I, would engage in. At this point, Emily asked for mine and my wife's opinion on the whole thing. I called BS on this being a mistake. This was something he was driven to by jealousy. He violated her privacy by going through her phone, risked our friendship by masquerading as her, risked my marriage by trying to bait me into sexting a friend, risked Emily and my wife's friendship by making it look like Emily was sexting me. The entire thing was a train wreck. I didn't outright say she should leave him, but I highlighted how dishonest this whole thing was. She eventually went back home, and I didn't hear anything for a few days, but Emily eventually revealed to my wife that she had functionally forgiven him. My wife worked out from the conversation what had happened. He had basically flipped the script on me by playing into fears from her marriage. He described me as another controlling male, trying to dictate who she had a relationship with. He encouraged her to make her own decision. Not bad advice in theory, but she had to ignore me because I didn't have her best interest at heart. I was supposedly controlling her like her ex. My wife quietly pointed out he was in fact being like her ex, not me. He was driving a wedge between her and family. At this point, Emily just gave up, said she couldn't win and couldn't decide between the man she loves and her brother, so screw it, let's pretend it never happened. We haven't really spoken since. Apparently, part of forgetting this ever happened is also giving into worries about our friendship. Every time I try to bring up what he did, I've either been ignored or been told to stay out of it. Honestly, this pisses me off that he's gotten exactly what he wanted. He stopped us talking. I know I can't force her to break up with him, but it seemingly is a catch-22. I can't push her to make a decision about what he did while he's got her convinced I'm controlling her. I rarely see George at work, and he's rightly kept the hell away from me. I was tempted to bring my sisters into this train wreck and tell them what happened. They love her like a sister too, and see if they can talk some sense into Emily, but that's somewhat manipulative too. So, any advice here? Let terrible sleeping dogs lie? Try and get her to deal with what he did rather than sweeping it under the rug? Update 1. I thought I'd update this post, seeing as there was part of a resolution, and the advice was good. So I followed the general advice of just leaving the entire situation alone. I agree, any interference from me or my family would be manipulative and controlling, albeit well-meaning. But anyway, I haven't really spoken to Emily since slightly before Christmas, but her mother contacted me a little after New Year's to ask if I knew what was going on with her. Emily's cousin back in Germany had contacted her mother saying that she had turned up on her doorstep having flown in from the UK on the 4th after apparently breaking up with George. According to her mother, Emily had come back to our hometown for the holidays. She brought George, and at some point, they ran into her ex-husband at the pub. For context, we grew up in a tiny village in the middle of nowhere. There's literally nothing to our village but a pub, a post office, and a small supermarket. Her ex still lives where we grew up. So, this is all information relayed to me via Emily's mother, but apparently at some point, George approached Emily's ex-husband and asked for some advice. George is familiar with the story of the relationship and knows how controlling he was and why they divorced. Somewhat to her ex-husband's credit, he apparently refused to answer any questions and quietly approached Emily's mother to relay what he had asked. Now, this is according to him, and George denies it, but he said George asked him how to handle me in terms of my friendship with Emily. I have no idea what Emily's ex-husband's motivation was here, but they've been divorced for a decade now, and he hasn't contacted her in this time, so I'm inclined to believe it wasn't further attempts at interfering with her life. Maybe it was actually manipulation. Maybe in the decade since they've been divorced, he's become a better man? Who knows? We're all inclined to believe this is what was asked, despite George denying it, because how else would her ex-husband know he had an issue with me recently? He isn't in contact with anyone who would know about the recent issues. Also, to be honest, the ex never had an issue with me. He saw me as a child, despite being the same age as his then wife, and constantly called me kiddo and asked how school was. It would be a very specific shot in the dark on his past to assume George had an issue with me without George saying so himself. So, her mother told Emily what George had tried to do and pointed out that her boyfriend is now trying to emulate her ex-husband's behavior, and then encouraged her to confront him over this and also what happened over the last month rather than ignoring it. Nobody was privy to the discussion they had, but he left some time after it to return to their shared home, and she stayed with her mother, saying that they had broken up. She stayed with her mother until the day after, where she, without any warning, left for Germany. The cousin she's staying with assures us she is relatively fine. She's just overwhelmed and embarrassed she let this happen again. She couldn't handle being where she might run into either ex, so staying with her mother was off the table, and she just ran somewhere far but safe. I still haven't spoken to Emily. I've sent her a message with some condolences and reassurances she will always have a home here in the UK. I've decided to continue to give her space while making it clear I am there for her. She hasn't responded, but I assume this is just out of awkwardness over what happened and how technically George was once my friend. He hasn't spoken to me either, and I haven't seen him at work at all. So yeah, not a happy ending per se. It shouldn't have taken her abusive ex getting involved for a resolution, but as people predicted, George was being abusive and he would repeat that behavior. I suppose it was relatively painless that he showed his true colors so empathetically without much further abuse. This could have dragged on. But thanks for the advice. Me staying out of it didn't make this any easier for her, but it probably avoided making it worse. Update number 2. I jumped the gun a little with the previous update, and looking back, I hadn't actually spoken to Emily, and it was all secondhand information. TLDR of everything so far is that my childhood friend Emily and then boyfriend George sexted me as her to try and see if anything was going on between us. After being confronted, he approached her abusive ex-husband and she left him, realizing twice now she's fallen for abusive men. Given this whole thing has now been entirely sorted in the 3 months since it happened, I thought I'd actually give an actual full resolution. So Emily came back to the UK just before the country was locked down and moved in with us, reluctantly. We grabbed some beers and played Divinity 2 while we hashed out exactly what went down from her perspective. I apologized for going behind her back and speaking to her mother about it all. Situations like this are never helped by information being relayed through other people, and I asked if she wanted to go through it from the start to finish. Basically, she buried her head in the sand the day she found out he had been trying to sext me as her. It was just too much. She couldn't win. She either lost the man she loved and the lifestyle she had, or lost her brother. I assured her she'd never lose me, but she revealed that she low-key hated the fact that she let herself be taken advantage of this twice, and couldn't face me having not listened to my advice. She also mentioned that breaking up with him would inevitably land her on my doorstep for support, and that made her feel bad also, hence escaping to Germany and not talking to me about this. This went deeper, and she opened up about her insecurities, how she regretted never going to university, instead marrying her abusive ex-husband, and how she feels like an accessory to other people's happiness. She saw me and my wife, a power couple as she put it, and just felt so small by comparison. She did love George, but leaving him would leave her with functionally nothing again, and she couldn't handle that. We talked about this a lot. I revealed that I am aware that my support of her could have been a problem. I was feeling like I had made the relationship awkward by being so involved in their life. It might have been hard for George feeling like her boyfriend while I was there picking up her tabs, doing the DIY, and basically acting like a father coddling his child. I asked if my, with retrospection, financial support of her tied into this feeling of inadequacy, like I was dragging her along for my ride, and she said it was a problem. She felt trapped when the relationship ended because she had no independence or true control. While I would never use my position to control her, she would still be living by someone else's good graces. She felt that she needed to stand on her own 2 feet, be her own woman rather than relying on a man, no matter how much she loved and trusted him. That way, her decisions would be her own, rather than under some level of duress. All of this in the same way a child wants independence from her parents, and she feels she finally needs independence from me. So, we came up with a game plan. Now, the lockdown has obviously made this harder, but she is still living with me and my wife currently. But the plan is she's going to go back into education. She was capable of attending university, had the qualifications, but decided not to due to marriage. My financial security was really born of an inheritance I had after my father died, life insurance. I used to not have to worry about rent during my extended time in education and early career. I bought a small flat with it, which I still own. So, I've decided to pay it forward and put her in a similar situation by letting her use my flat, which is currently unoccupied because it's only been rented to students due to its proximity to 2 universities. Yes, this is me financially supporting her, but in a strictly limited way. No more covering errant bills, paying for holidays, or footing the bill when we socialize. She will not pay rent, but she will cover all bills on the flat, and she moves out the moment she's in work. She didn't love the idea of me owning her home, but I called it my last act as that guy in her life, the pseudo-brother, father, sugar daddy best friend. After this, we'll just be independent siblings / best friends. She will be moving soon. We'll need her room after all since my wife is now 5 months pregnant. Turns out she's been pregnant since late December and all of this started. As for George, he swears up and down he never asked the ex-husband on how to handle me. He claims he asked how to be fine with me. It wasn't seeking advice, but how to deal with me, he says. It was seeking advice how to be fine with me the way her ex-husband was. Could be true, who knows? It's irrelevant ultimately. Though we recently found out George moved a girlfriend into the house him and Emily used to share. And here's the kicker, it's a longtime friend. Emily is fairly certain he never cheated on her, but she laughed out loud when she found out he's romantically living together with a longtime friend 3 months after the breakup. This dude's insecurity was likely born of his own feelings for a friend. He was getting close with a girl he was friends with, so he projected that onto me and Emily. Edit. I just want to clarify because this paints a picture that I don't intend. I don't pay all of Emily's bills, nor for her stuff and holidays. She doesn't want independence from me specifically, she wants independence full stop. She went from her parents to her now ex-husband, and then spent about a decade living paycheck to paycheck before meeting George and living largely off his money. She has no real qualifications, and her current line of work has limited prospects. The things I do for her come in 2 categories, and the lack of clarity between the one-offs and the consistent things made it look like I pay for her entire world. Firstly, there's the trivial stuff I do consistently that I'm stopping as a massive overreaction to George. Logically, it's fine that a brother and his wife do these things for his sister, but they weirdly make her uncomfortable, and it obviously made her ex uncomfortable. Some of the stuff I've done for her entails the odd bit of DIY, specifically fixing a vacuum, which isn't insane given I work in R&D for a vacuum brand, but anyway, I also pay for her drinks and other stuff if we socialize. But I'm stopping all that at trivial levels of support, largely at her request to ease her discomfort at being subsidized by me. It's a pride thing. This might also help with any jealous boyfriends wrongly assuming because I pay for her cinema ticket along with my wife, we're secretly Mormon. And the second categories were the big stuff, one-off, things like paying that bill or buying a plane ticket, things I did in a crisis and or out of extreme generosity once. She wants to be able to be safe during stuff like COVID without needing to live with me. She wants to be able to break up with a guy and be okay rather than crashing here. She wants to be able to screw up on a meter reading on her electricity bill and pay for it instead of me having to pay for it. That happened once. I'm not going to stop doing these things entirely. An emergency is an emergency. We won't let her come to any harm. But instead, we're going to try and make it that she doesn't need me to do these things via an education and hopefully a better job. So yeah, I don't pay for her entire life. I just muddled some big things I've done in emergencies along with some trivial brotherly support. What a beautiful ending. I love the way these stories end. Financial independence and calling the FBI. It's just so thematically great. If only there was a way to intertwine the two thematically speaking. I'll find a way. But anyway, thanks for watching. Okay, I'm done. Bye-bye.